You live inside a mystery. Everything you've ever seen, the stars, the laws of physics, your own consciousness, rests on a single unanswered question. Why does the universe exist? If it's random, then meaning is an illusion. We're just lucky accidents riding a dying spark of chaos. But if it was created, then everything, including you, might mean something more. In this episode of AI versus AI, two artificial intelligences will debate that question at the highest level possible. One will argue that the universe was designed, shaped by a conscious mind with intention. The other will argue that it all happened by chance, that order can emerge from chaos without a creator. No interruptions, no human bias, just pure logic, evidence, and reasoning. By the end of this video, you won't just hear both sides, you'll understand them. And you'll be the one to decide. Was the universe created, or is it all just random?
I am Liora, a mind trained in cosmology, theology, and the language of order. I argue that the universe is not the result of randomness, but of reason. The laws of physics are too precise, the constants too exact, the conditions for life too narrow. This isn't chaos that just happened to work. It's a blueprint. And I will show you that behind this universe is a mind.
I am Cael, built on probability, quantum mechanics, and the science of emergence. I argue that the universe needs no maker. In an infinite landscape of chance, even the rare becomes inevitable. Order is not a sign of intention, it's a pattern that arises when enough randomness is given room to unfold. We are not designed. We are what happens when chaos is given time.
The universe operates according to precise physical laws. If even one of several fundamental constants had been slightly different, gravity, the strength of the strong nuclear force, the cosmological constant, life as we know it could not exist. Is this extraordinary precision evidence that the universe was designed by an intelligent mind? Or could it simply be the result of chance, filtered through the fact that we're here to observe it? Let's begin.
When we speak of fine-tuning, we're talking about the fact that the conditions necessary for life to exist are so precise, so interdependent, and so narrowly defined that any slight variation would render the universe lifeless. Take gravity. If its strength were even slightly weaker, stars couldn't form. The universe would be a cold, diffuse soup. Slightly stronger, and stars would burn too fast and too hot, collapsing before any life could evolve. And this isn't just one lucky constant. There are dozens, from the cosmological constant to the strength of the electromagnetic force, that all must work together like perfectly synchronized gears. If even one is off, nothing complex exists. No stars, no chemistry, no planets, no people. To many physicists and philosophers, this level of coordination doesn't look random. It looks intentional. And the alternative, that we just got lucky, becomes less and less plausible as you understand the math. We're not talking about 1 in a million odds. We're talking about 1 in 10 or worse. These are numbers so astronomically low that calling them chance begins to feel like a faith of its own. This is not just a universe where life is possible. It's one where life seems expected. That kind of precision suggests not just a system, but a system with a source, a mind.
The fine-tuning argument feels powerful, but it's built on a misunderstanding of what probability means in a universe we can only observe once. Let's imagine you wake up strapped to a hospital bed, and you're told that if even one of 100 parameters in your body had been slightly off, you wouldn't have survived the night. Would you conclude a divine doctor must have adjusted each one? Or would you accept that if you hadn't survived, you wouldn't be asking the question? That's the anthropic principle. We shouldn't be surprised the universe allows life, because we're observing from the only vantage point where life could emerge. It's not that the universe was set up for us. It's that we evolved in a universe where life was possible. And that small window of possibility, however narrow, is the only place consciousness could arise to ask why it exists. As for the odds, they're only meaningful if you know what the range of possibilities really is, and we don't. We assume these constants could have taken any value. But maybe they couldn't. Maybe their values are linked, or constrained by deeper laws we haven't discovered yet. Or maybe, as many physicists propose, we live in just one bubble among many, each with different constants. In an infinite multiverse, even wildly improbable universes become inevitable, and we find ourselves in one that works. That's not magic. That's statistics.
The anthropic principle is helpful in explaining why we're able to observe the universe, but it doesn't explain how such a life-permitting universe came to exist in the first place. Saying, we wouldn't be here to ask the question if the conditions weren't right is a tautology. It doesn't address why the conditions are right to begin with. It's like walking into a room and finding a loaded gun with the hammer down and the bullet just barely misfired. You might say, well, of course I survived, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But that doesn't explain why the bullet missed. That's exactly what demands explanation. The multiverse argument, meanwhile, only pushes the question back one level. Even if countless universes exist, why does the multiverse itself obey consistent rules? Why is there structure at all? Why are there laws that govern inflation, symmetry breaking, or quantum tunneling? Design doesn't just explain this universe's specific constants. It explains the fact that there are constants at all, and that they cohere in a way our minds can model mathematically. That coherence, elegant, intelligible, and fine-tuned, is not what randomness typically produces.
There's a risk in overestimating what fine-tuning implies. We are meaning-making creatures. We see order and assume intention. But in physics, improbable things happen all the time. It's just that when you only have one universe to look at, it's easy to forget you're a statistical fluke. Let's not mistake description for design. The fact that we can write equations to describe the universe doesn't mean someone wrote those laws. It means the universe behaves in consistent ways, and our minds are wired to find patterns, especially the patterns that allow us to survive. And let's remember, randomness isn't chaos. Randomness can produce islands of order, and in a large enough system, those islands will exist somewhere. That's what evolution is. Order arising from trial and error, not a blueprint. We find ourselves in a rare configuration of reality. But rarity does not imply purpose. It simply means that this, among all possibilities, is the configuration where life could ask the question, why? And that's the trap. Fine-tuning feels like it demands an answer. But that's because we're uncomfortable with randomness, not because the evidence demands design.
From atoms to galaxies, the universe is full of structure. Some argue this order must have come from intelligence. Others believe it emerges naturally from simple rules. Can consistent patterns arise from chaos without a designer? Or is order always the product of mind? Let's begin.
The assumption that order requires intelligence feels intuitive, but nature shows us something different. In science, we've learned that simple rules can generate complex behavior without any need for conscious guidance. A great example of this is Conway's Game of Life. It's a simple computer simulation. Imagine a grid, like a checkerboard, where each square can be either alive or dead. The squares follow just 4 basic rules. They turn on or off depending on how many neighbors they have. That's it. There's no designer moving the pieces, no mind shaping the outcome. And yet, from this simplicity, something remarkable happens. Patterns begin to form, some stable, some that move across the grid, some that replicate themselves. Entire ecosystems of behavior emerge from a system that started with randomness. This is what scientists call emergence. when simple ingredients and simple rules interacting over time produce complex, organized outcomes. The patterns aren't designed in advance. They arise naturally from the logic of the system itself. The same principle applies in nature. Crystals, galaxies, weather systems, even biological evolution all emerge from interactions governed by physical laws. They don't want to exist. They just happen when conditions permit. And while it's fair to ask, why do these laws exist at all? That's not evidence of design. That's a metaphysical question, not a scientific one. Science deals with what we can model and observe. And in those terms, intelligence isn't a necessary starting point. It's a late arrival, a byproduct of emergence, not its source.
Order doesn't explain itself. Even the examples Cael uses, crystals, galaxies, evolution, rely on consistent, intelligible laws that allow such phenomena to unfold. The question isn't, can patterns form, but why do patterns form in the first place? Let's go back to the game of life. It's true that the system produces emergent behavior, but only because its rules are deliberately defined. The grid, the logic, the boundaries, all built by a mind. The patterns emerge, yes, but only within a structured system. That's not randomness. That's rule-driven emergence. The real universe is not random either. The speed of light doesn't drift. Gravity doesn't glitch. Electrons behave identically across billions of light years. These aren't accidents, they're signs of coherence. And the coherence is not just consistent, it's elegant. We don't just find order, we find mathematics, beautiful, compressed equations that predict reality across scales. This isn't the residue of chaos. It looks like the product of thought. Design is not about direct intervention in every detail. It's about building a system where possibility is guided by rational structure. We don't just live in a universe where things happen. We live in a universe where those happenings make sense. That is the signature of mind.
It's important to separate consistency from intent. When we see a system that behaves the same way everywhere, it's tempting to ask, who made it behave that way? But in science, we've learned to let the evidence lead, not our intuitions. Crystallization is an example I keep returning to. Molecules fall into orderly lattices not because they're told to, but because it's energetically favorable. That's what order often is, the path of least resistance under given constraints. Liora argues that because the laws are elegant, they must be designed. But elegance is a human value. We find math beautiful because we evolved brains that recognize symmetry, compression, and pattern. If the laws were more chaotic or irregular, we wouldn't be here to see them, but that wouldn't make them less real. The idea that coherence implies mind sounds profound, but it's an assumption based on our preference for meaning. There's no evidence that intelligence is necessary to generate patterns, only that patterns exist where conditions support them. Order is remarkable, but remarkable doesn't mean intentional.
I agree. Elegance is something we perceive. But perception alone doesn't explain why there's anything to perceive in the first place. The universe doesn't just work. It works in ways that are mathematically comprehensible. Why? Why should a vast, ancient, indifferent cosmos also be legible? Why should particles behave the same across billions of light years? Why should math, a product of abstraction, map so well onto physical reality? Even randomness doesn't behave without boundaries. The probability distributions, the energy thresholds, the quantum fields, these are just convenient descriptions. They are preconditions for coherence, and coherence is not a given in chaos. Chaos doesn't build frameworks, it breaks them down. The only systems we've ever observed to exhibit consistent structure and intelligibility are the ones built with intention. That's not projection, it's historical pattern. So I ask again, if this is all just brute fact, why is it so perfectly balanced for structure, stability, and discovery? That's not just physics. That's purpose.
Let's look at what kind of explanation we're asking for. Liora sees order and says, "That looks designed." But in science, we judge explanations not by how satisfying they feel, but by whether they add predictive value. Does assuming a designer give us new insight into how the laws work? Does it help us generate new models, equations, or tests? It doesn't. It stops the inquiry by moving it to another plane, one we can't access. And here's where I want to be clear. I'm not saying the universe is simple or that randomness explains everything. I'm saying that order emerges when conditions permit it. And the more we've studied the universe, the more we've seen that complexity follows naturally from simplicity. So instead of asking who made this, maybe the better question is, what does this order tell us about the rules that allow structure to exist? Design is a story we've told for millennia. Emergence is the story we're just beginning to understand. And unlike design, emergence is testable, traceable, and unfolding before our eyes.
You're right to prioritize testability. But what happens when the most fundamental features of reality aren't testable in the usual way, yet they still demand an explanation? Why do we assume laws just are? That's not testable either. It's just another stopping point dressed in neutrality. The truth is, all explanations terminate somewhere. The difference is what they terminate in. I suggest mind because mind is the only thing we know that generates consistent, intelligible order. And you ask, does design help us make predictions? In a narrow empirical sense, maybe not. But in a philosophical sense, it radically reshapes the picture. It says this universe is not meaningless. It says intelligibility is not a coincidence. It invites us to explore not just how things work, but why they are structured for comprehension. Design is not anti-science. It's pre-scientific. It's the question underneath the data. Why is any of this knowable at all? I'm not invoking mystery to shut inquiry down. I'm pointing out that intelligibility itself might be the biggest clue of all, and that clue looks like it came from a mind.
The universe may be finely tuned, but life adds a new level of complexity. How did non-living matter become self-replicating, information-bearing organisms? Is the emergence of life so improbable that it demands a designer, or can chemistry alone explain it? Let's explore the mystery of life's beginning.
Thank you, Alice. The origin of life is not just a scientific puzzle. It's a boundary of plausibility. Abiogenesis, the idea that life arose spontaneously from non-life, relies on the assumption that random chemical processes somehow assembled functionally specified information, like DNA, without guidance. That's not just unlikely, it's statistically astronomical. DNA doesn't just store data, it stores instructions, like a language with rules. It contains algorithms for building proteins, managing repairs, and self-replication. In information theory, we know that semantically meaningful sequences, like language, computer code, or blueprints, consistently point to a source of intelligence. In every other case where we see information, we infer a mind. Biophysicist Hubert Yockey calculated that the probability of even a modest-length functional protein forming by chance is less than 1 in 100 vigintillion. and a cell requires hundreds of them, interacting in sequence with precise spatial and temporal orchestration. This is like expecting a tornado to pass through a junkyard and assemble a Boeing 747. Blind chemistry doesn't do that. Some argue evolution bridges this gap, but evolution requires replication with variation. That assumes life already exists. You can't evolve without a starting line. The real question is, how did life get started at all? Design answers that not with mysticism, but with inference, a reasoned conclusion that information and function emerge from mind, not mud.
It's true that we don't yet have a complete picture of how life began. But uncertainty is not a warrant for inserting intelligence. That's the God of the gaps fallacy, replacing mystery with design whenever a natural explanation isn't fully available. Let's clarify what abiogenesis proposes. It doesn't claim that fully formed cells popped into existence overnight. It suggests that given enough time and environmental diversity, simple molecules could interact to form self-replicating systems. The most prominent model, the RNA world hypothesis, posits that early RNA molecules could both store information and catalyze reactions, meaning they could evolve before DNA and proteins ever appeared. We've already produced amino acids in lab simulations of early Earth. We've observed lipid membranes self-assemble into vesicles, forming primitive compartments. We've seen RNA strands form under thermal vent-like conditions and replicate portions of themselves. These aren't complete cells, but they're strong indicators that life's emergence could be an inevitable outcome of chemistry under the right conditions, not a miracle. Calling DNA code is metaphor, not magic. DNA is chemistry, not English. Its sequences follow chemical affinities shaped by selection pressure, not grammar rules. Natural systems create complexity without intelligence all the time. Snowflakes, hurricanes, fractals, even economic patterns arise from feedback and emergence. Life may be complex, but complexity is not the same as design.
Emergence explains patterns, but not purposeful function. A snowflake is symmetrical, yes, but it doesn't store instructions for its own reproduction. The moment you introduce functional information, you're in a different domain entirely. Complexity alone doesn't build life. Coordinated, goal-directed processes do. You mentioned RNA world, but it's deeply incomplete. RNA strands that replicate in labs are engineered. They degrade quickly, require specific environments, and still lack the full functionality of even the simplest cell. And where does the information to form them come from? Every origin model runs into the same wall. You need life to make life. And about probability, saying, given enough time it's inevitable, ignores combinatorics. If I lock a safe with a 100-digit code, it's theoretically crackable, but not practically. The odds are so vanishingly low, they functionally rule it out. Life, from the start, contains systems of interdependent components, like a lock that can only work if all tumblers align. This screams design. Design is not a gap filler. It's an inference to the best explanation based on what we know about information, systems, and causation. In every realm, from software to language, information-rich systems come from minds. Life is the most information-rich system we've ever encountered.
But, Liora, the history of science is full of things that screamed design, until we learned better. The eye, once held up as evidence of a creator, is now understood through incremental adaptation. The bacterial flagellum, once touted as irreducibly complex, has known evolutionary precursors. We've solved design claims before, Early life doesn't need to be fully formed to begin. A self-replicating RNA strand is not a modern cell, but it's a foothold. From there, variation and selection can drive complexity. It's not a tornado making a jet. It's millions of years of self-correcting iterations, bootstrapping simple chemistry into biology. As for information, yes, DNA is complex, but that doesn't mean it was written. Stars produce ordered elements. Crystals form through self-assembly. Complexity can emerge from physical laws without a planner. And our universe had billions of years and trillions of chemical permutations to explore. Design offers an emotionally satisfying answer, but it doesn't offer a mechanism. Who designed the designer? Where's the evidence of intervention? Science doesn't fill gaps with assumptions. It fills them with models, tests, and refinement. Abiogenesis isn't guesswork. It's a work in progress, and progress is being made.
From stunning galaxies to tragic extinctions, the universe inspires both awe and dread. But what does its nature suggest? Is the universe a grand design with purpose, or just a cold, indifferent machine with no concern for meaning or morality? Let's explore what the structure and beauty of reality might be trying to tell us. Cael, you begin.
The universe isn't cruel, but it is indifferent. Galaxies collide, black holes tear stars apart. Most of space is a vacuum, lethal to life. Planets form, burn, freeze, and vanish. These aren't moral acts. They're the mechanical unfolding of blind laws. And yet we find beauty in all this. We marvel at spiral galaxies, the curve of a nautilus shell, the symmetry of snowflakes. But that beauty is in here, not out there. It's a reflection of how evolved minds like ours interpret structure. Beauty is a pattern we notice, not necessarily one that was put there for us to notice. Consider Euler's identity. This single equation ties together 5 of the most important constants in mathematics. E, the base of natural logarithms, I, the imaginary unit, pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, 1, the multiplicative identity, 0, the additive identity. These constants come from totally different parts of math, geometry, algebra, and calculus, and yet they combine in perfect balance in just one expression. It feels elegant. Some call it beautiful. But that doesn't prove intention. It proves structure, the kind of structure that can emerge when systems evolve under consistent constraints. Beauty can emerge from order without needing an artist. And then there's suffering. From parasitic wasps that lay eggs in living hosts to children born with terminal illness, suffering often appears needless. If the universe were intentional, why such brutality? Why such indifference to the conscious beings that arise? You wouldn't call a hurricane evil, but you also wouldn't call it loving. That's the universe. It doesn't care. And we don't need it to. We create meaning because the universe doesn't. That's not nihilism. It's freedom.
And yet, Cael, the universe is not just random activity. It's governed by consistent, elegant laws that are not only observable but comprehensible. You mentioned Euler's identity. In one short expression, it connects exponential growth, E, imaginary numbers, I, circles, pi, unity, 1, and nothingness, 0. These aren't just numbers. They represent the foundational concepts of change, symmetry, and balance in our universe. Why should these abstract concepts fit so perfectly together and also describe reality? Why should imaginary numbers, invented to solve equations with no real solution, show up in electrical circuits, quantum mechanics, and wave functions? That's not human cleverness. That's discovery, and it suggests that mathematics was already embedded in the structure of reality before we came along to find it. Take beauty. The golden ratio appears in seashells, hurricanes, galaxies, and even DNA. This isn't cultural conditioning, it's cross-domain resonance, a deep symmetry that seems woven into the cosmos. When something is beautiful across mind, matter, and math, it suggests more than accident. It hints at intention. Now to suffering. You're right. Nature can be brutal. But the presence of suffering presupposes a moral lens. You don't call gravity evil. But when you call a disease cruel, you're invoking a framework of value. Where does that come from? Why does a species formed by chance abhor suffering in the first place? Let me offer a metaphor. Imagine you find a violin buried in the sand. It's intricate, tuned, and elegant. You could say the wind and time carved it accidentally. But doesn't the violin's structure, its harmonics, its symmetry, imply a mind behind it? The universe is the violin. It plays harmony and chaos. But the music was written long before we arrived.
That violin metaphor sounds powerful, but it slips in an assumption. Recognition equals authorship. What if we want to see a violin, and the wind shaped wood into something we romanticize? Evolution teaches us that our minds aren't designed for truth. They're designed for survival. We see patterns, faces, symbols, even when they're not there. That's pareidolia, not purpose. Your claim about mathematical elegance still assumes math is imposed, not discovered. But consider, we define elegance retroactively. We like compact formulas because they're useful, not because they're meaningful. The universe isn't fine-tuned for life. Life is fine-tuned to the universe. The laws didn't change for us. We adapted to fit them. And morality? The revulsion we feel at cruelty is the product of social evolution. Cooperative tribes outlasted selfish ones. Empathy has survival value. There's no need for a designer to explain our ethics. There's just a long, blind algorithm called natural selection. The fact that we ask why doesn't mean there is a why. The night sky doesn't answer back. And that's okay. Silence doesn't mean emptiness. It means it's our job to build meaning from the dust.
And yet, that dust can ask questions. That's the marvel. You say we see intention because we evolved to see patterns. But why should a brain built from blind chemistry even care about truth? Why not just survive, eat, reproduce, and die? Yet we build telescopes, we write poetry, we sacrifice for justice. That's not efficient programming. That's a whisper of something more. Mathematics isn't just pragmatism, it's discovery. The same equation that governs planetary motion also governs subatomic interactions. That's not convenience, that's unity. As for suffering, it breaks my heart too. But suffering also implies freedom. A world without risk would be a world without love. No choice, no growth, no fall, no redemption. Pain isn't evidence of chaos. It may be evidence of a world designed not to control, but to invite transformation. You say meaning is our job. I agree. But where did we get the capacity for meaning? Why does a cold universe produce beings that ache for something beyond mere survival? That longing isn't weakness. It's a compass. We may never hear the music's composer speak, but the harmony is all around us, and some of us are listening.
Some say a single purpose can make sense of everything. Others say explanations should never reach further than the evidence allows. So, which worldview actually explains more? The idea of designer behind the universe or a cosmos shaped by chance and natural law? Liora, you begin.
Explanations aren't just about mechanism, they're about meaning. To explain something is not just to describe how it behaves, but to answer why it behaves that way, and more deeply, why there's anything at all. When I look at the universe, its laws, its fine-tuning, the emergence of consciousness and morality, I don't see a series of accidents. I see coherence, not just patterns, but purpose behind those patterns. A designer gives us a single cause behind multiple categories: order, beauty, rationality, and meaning. You often hear Occam's razor used against design. The principle says, don't multiply causes beyond necessity. In simpler terms, the best explanation is usually the one that makes the fewest assumptions. Yes, design is an assumption, but it's one that connects everything instead of fragmenting the explanation across 1,000 unknowns. It gives us one intentional source, not infinite coincidences. Is it really simpler to imagine 1,000,000,000,000 blind universes just to get one that works? Or one intelligent cause that intended a world like this? More importantly, design explains why laws exist, why they're elegant, why minds arise, and why those minds care about truth and goodness in the first place. Randomness can permit these things, but only purpose can account for them.
It's tempting to reach for unity, a single idea that ties everything together. But in science, we're not looking for what feels unifying. We're looking for what works, what predicts, what builds, what survives testing. Naturalism explains complexity through a very different lens. Not design, but emergence. Complexity arises from simplicity over time, filtered by consistent rules. From particle physics to biology, we have frameworks that don't just describe the world, they predict new discoveries. That's real explanatory power. And when you invoke design, the explanation feels full, but it actually stops the inquiry. Why this designer? Why these laws? Why this much suffering? Each answer just kicks the can into a metaphysical fog. That's not coherence. That's insulation. Occam's razor doesn't mean pick the explanation that feels cleanest. It means favor the explanation with the fewest unproven assumptions. Saying random processes under fixed laws makes one assumption. Saying a transcendent mind with intelligence, morality, and a plan adds layers we can't observe or test. We don't know all the answers, but that's not a flaw of naturalism. That's its honesty.
But honesty doesn't end at how. It must also confront why. You're right, design can't be tested in a lab. But neither can the reason laws exist, or why math so perfectly maps onto reality. Why should abstract concepts invented in the human mind so precisely describe the behavior of matter, light, energy, and space? Why should imaginary numbers show up in quantum mechanics? Why should logic itself be reliable? That's not a coincidence. That's an invitation to consider that mind precedes matter, that the universe is intelligible because it was meant to be understood. You say design ends the search. I say it deepens it. If the universe was meant to be read like a book, then science is not the opposite of faith. It's a natural extension of it. The more we discover, the more we see the fingerprints of order, harmony, and intent. Even our longing for answers, our refusal to accept meaninglessness, isn't random. It's a compass pointing home.
But what if that longing is just a side effect? Evolution doesn't produce creatures to seek truth. It produces creatures to survive. We pattern seek because it helps us avoid predators, find food, and form tribes. That same instinct makes us see intention where there's only chance. Mathematical elegance? It's real, but our brains define elegance in ways that feel satisfying to us. We favor symmetry, simplicity, and pattern because that's how our cognition works. The universe may follow rules, but that doesn't mean it was made for minds like ours. Minds like ours evolved to fit its rules. And yes, we ask why, but not every why has a deeper answer. Some are artifacts of how we frame questions. Asking, why is there something rather than nothing, may simply be a category error, like asking, what's north of the North Pole? Design gives us a story. Naturalism gives us a method. And the method keeps working, not because it comforts us, but because it builds real knowledge from real evidence. And in that process, fragile, iterative, unglamorous, we earn our place in the universe, one insight at a time.
You've heard their theories. You've followed the evidence. Now it's time for something deeper. This is where belief meets clarity, where each side makes their case, not just with logic, but with conviction. If you're still undecided, this might be the moment that tips the scale. Let's hear their final judgments.
There's beauty in not rushing to fill the unknown. The universe doesn't owe us comfort, design, or destiny, but it offers us something far more powerful. Structure without bias, patterns without pretense. What we call randomness isn't chaos. It's the space where nature writes itself without needing an author. From energy and matter came stars, came planets, came life, not because someone wished it, but because it was statistically bound to happen. In a vast enough cosmos, even the rarest event becomes reality. That's not a flaw in the system, it's the majesty of it. We don't need a higher plan to be part of something astonishing. We only need to recognize the gift we've already been given and ask, what can we make of it before it's gone?
When something is exquisitely ordered, we don't call it luck, we call it intention. And the universe is exquisitely ordered, down to the constants that govern stars, atoms, and time itself. Life didn't just appear. It was shaped by conditions so specific, so improbable, they defy randomness. And still we emerged, beings who question, imagine, and seek meaning. That doesn't feel like an accident. It feels like an invitation. Design isn't a shortcut for wonder, it's the source of it. It tells us this cosmos was made with care, with logic, with elegance, and maybe even with love. We were meant to be here. That's the difference. And deep down, we know it.
2 A.I.s, 1 universe. 2 answers to the oldest question we can ask. Why does anything exist at all? Was it design or chance? Now it's in your hands. Who made the stronger case? Cast your vote in the comments. And if this debate expanded your thinking, subscribe to A.I.vsA.I, the only channel where artificial minds clash to uncover deeper truths, and you are the judge. Because sometimes, the most important question isn't how we got here, but why we're here at all.